so much for joining us today. Hopefully you can see my screen. We really appreciate that you all are here. We have quite a good turnout, and so we're really excited about that. For those of you who don't know, my name is Strathaus, and I'm a consultant at Cosmic Centaurs. I'm going to be your MC for the strategic planning Q&A, and today's session is brought to you by Cosmic Centaurs and Strathaus. So we have two incredible leaders and advisors who are going to be sharing more about how to get your 2022 off to the right start. And just a note on our topic today, actually, it's centered around the annual process of strategic planning, and that's not to be confused with developing long-term strategies. They have a slightly different intellectual process and outcomes, and today we're going to be talking about all things strategy, annual planning, KPI setting, and budgeting. It can seem like a daunting task to some. I know that I definitely felt that when we first started with the different processes that you'll be seeing today, but in fact, our guests are going to be showing you how to make high impact strategies a little bit fun. So it's not too late if you have questions to drop them into the chat. Just worth mentioning, if you want to keep your questions anonymous, please send them directly to me. If you're happy for everybody else to see your questions, then go ahead. Our moderators in the chat will be looking out for them, and hopefully our guests will be able to get to all of the questions you guys have. This session is recorded. From me, I want to actually introduce you to our guests today. We have Marilyn and Roger. Marilyn is tuning in from Dubai, and she's the CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs. Marilyn founded a company that builds happier workplaces, and we help leaders and organizations adapt to the new ways of work in the emerging post-pandemic world. Marilyn has experience in organizations of all sizes and can bring the agility of small startups to big corporations. Previously, she was chief marketing officer at Ahmad and head of the Dubai Opera. And before that, she got her executive MBA from INSEAD after spending 10 years in the startup world building and running digitally native companies. Also with us today is Roger, who is the founding partner at Strathaus, a firm that is dedicated to helping private and public organizations develop their strategies. Based in France and Lebanon, the organization works with clients across sectors, mainly in Europe and the GCC. Roger has more than 10 years of experience in strategy consulting. He's worked for Monitor Deloitte in Paris and Dubai, and also as an independent advisor to the public and private sector. But without further ado, let's get started. We have a ton of questions that were previously submitted by some of our attendees. And like I said, it's not too late to drop yours into the chat box. Our moderators will be on the lookout for them, and we're always happy to take them. So maybe, Roger, we can get started with you. We'd love to know, when it comes to annual strategic planning, where do we start? And I think I'll stop sharing now so that we can see the faces of our guests today.
Yeah, thank you, Tala. So it's a good question, because sometimes, you know, when we start doing these tasks, it looks like we have a mountain to climb and we don't know where to start, right? I would say, well, the first one I would like to say is that first, the yearly strategic planning is not a budget plan, right? So we do not start with a budget. The budget is the bottom of the whole process. The budget is the result of all the thinking that comes behind it. So that's the first one, and I would like to, you know, focus on that, because I often see that with my clients, where they want to plan for the year and then they go straight to their Excel models and start, you know, putting inputs, where this should be the result of the whole, you know, strategic thinking behind it. That being said, I would say the first thing to do is a little bit process driven, in the sense that you need to create or have a core team that will be leading this exercise of strategic planning. We can talk about, you know, how to you know, create this team later on in the discussion, but there are many different ways to approach this. And the second thing you need is that you need a process, right? You need a timeline with clear milestones and deliverable. Even though this looks, I would say, this sounds obvious, it's really a very important foundation that you need if you want to create a strategic plan. Now, after that, after you settle your core team, and then you have your process and milestone, at least you have a way to the top of the mountain, right? You at least you know that, okay, I'm going to go through these different milestones to get to the top of the mountain. Intellectually, I would start the process with looking at 4 for distinct things. The first thing I would look at is my overall objective and vision, kind of my long-term journey, right? Because you don't want to develop a yearly plan without taking that into consideration. So it's always good to, take a step back, okay, see what is this company about? What do we want to achieve within 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing I would look at is look at the past year, look at my performance, right? You probably have a yearly plan from the previous year, right? So you want to look at, okay, did I achieve my goals? Did I get where I want to be, right? How did I perform? What went wrong? It's always also good to challenge yourself and to go into before going to the strategic planning process. I think the worst thing is to say, we were so good last year, we were great. And then, you start on the wrong foot to develop, your strategic plan. The third thing I would look at is really kind of, what market, what external and internal shifts we've seen this year, right? Because, I mean, COVID is the best example, but even before COVID, you should be looking at this, right? Because a lot of things can happen very quickly in the market. So what happened in the market? Is there a new competitor? Is there a big regulation that changed the game, right? What is the game-changing events that happened this year externally, but also internally? Did I lose a whole team, right? Did I underperform did I have to close a plant or a fabric or whatever it is, right? So that's the third thing I would look at, is like, what element has changed the game, right? And the fourth thing I would look at before starting is really something that is, I would say, somehow always there, but underestimated, which is the shareholder desires, right? Who owns the people that owns the company? What do they want, right? Because you can have the best plan in the world. You can have, it can be all data driven, like it's all clear to you. If it doesn't fit what they want, then your plan goes to the garbage, right? So to summarize, I would say, look at your long-term vision, see if you're in line with it and what you want to achieve, who you want to be. It's always good to have those existential crises, right? Especially at the beginning of the year. Two, look at your previous year performance. Three, you can look at what has changed the game in the market or internally. And then four is really look at shareholders, try to get, in their mind and see what they expect, right? When you have those four elements, this is, I would say, a very good start, especially if you can document them, right? If you can put it on paper and have a clear vision of what's happening. After that, this is I would say, the art piece of the whole strategic development process. This is where you kind of ask yourself, okay, well, by looking at all those four things, what are my strategic priorities for this year? What do I want to achieve? And honestly, there's no secret recipe for that, right? It's really about getting people engaged, talking with your team, analyzing that data. There's no way that you can process all the data that you have and there's a magic answer that comes out of it, right? So it's always a choice. This is what I wanted to say. Like the strategic plan that you develop is always a choice. It's never the universal truth, right? So what you would do now, after looking at those four things, is really identify your priorities for the year. I usually like to have 3 or 4 strategic priorities. 5, 6, 7 is becoming too much. But what I also like to do a lot is have what I call, or actually what we call at Strathaus, the center of gravity, right? If I were to summarize my priorities for the next year, what is my center of gravity, right? What is my one thing that I should think about all the time? And maybe one example that we often give to our clients is, Facebook, when they, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, they've realized that their one center of gravity was to shift to mobile, right? That's it. It was this one sentence that was the center of gravity for their whole strategic, annual strategic plan. And all the company was aware of that. We are shifting to mobile, right? Then you might have other priorities here and there, but it's always good to summarize it in a very simple and clear statement for everyone. So I would stop here. I mean, there are other steps, right, that we can talk about, but the question was, where do we start, right? We can start there, but it never ends also, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've given us really solid foundations. Actually, for anybody who missed that, Marilyn dropped Roger's 4 pillars in the chat box. Marilyn, maybe I'll just really quickly ask you to add to that. And maybe you can tell us a little bit. Roger mentioned choice and how making choices really determines what the strategy, would look like in the beginning of the process. When it comes to making choices, and leaders and those who are involved in strategy, what can you tell us about your approach and perspective?
Yeah, I mean, what Roger is saying is really very powerful in terms of, as a decision maker and someone who has to develop some kind of instinct about what the way forward is for an organization, you need to start, we rely a lot on design thinking as a methodology, like what Roger said about starting from a place of not assuming anything about what the world looks like today and trying to gather as much insight as possible from how the market has changed, from how you as an organization has changed, from what your strategic imperatives are, what you have in your gut about your purpose and why you exist, and how that guides your strategic decisions. And I think that's something that I always like to say about making strategic decisions. We have a tendency to also think that strategic decisions are also always additive, meaning like, I'm going to come here, I'm going to think about what I'm going to do next year, and it has to be to this year plus something else, and it always has to, like, we keep piling on strategic goals, right? That golden star or that center of gravity, as Roger said. One note I'll just say about decision, that's an anecdote I always like to tell, is that strategy is about making choices, is about making decisions. And something beautiful about the word decision is that it has the same root as the word scissor. And that root, the cis, is about cutting, right? And I think that it's equally important to focus on what we will not be doing next year, because companies have a tendency to, every time someone gets a good idea, we jump on it. And I think there are many places from which to say, we won't do this. There's a place of your purpose. Like, if you have a very clear purpose and this strategy might make you a lot of money, but it's not aligned with why you exist and who you are as an organization, cut it out. If it's a great idea, but actually you need 10 times more resources than you're currently going to be able to have, cut it out. If it doesn't fit it within your capabilities, like, oh my God, I wish I could do this, but I can't, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the expertise, cut it out. So I think it's equally about what do we do, but also about being very clear on what we won't do.
Yeah, I fully agree, Marilyn. Actually, we always start our projects with the kickoff meeting with the client. One of the first questions we ask is, what are you not, right? And it's much easier for them to answer and gives us more, data for us, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you guys both. That's a really good starting point. And actually, maybe the next question is, now that we have those foundations, maybe Roger, we can start with you. What frameworks do you like to use when it comes to building annual strategic plans?
Yes. So there are tons and tons of frameworks out there, right? It's really like, and you can get overwhelmed and you can get confused. I tend to like to build my own framework depending on clients and their needs. However, I always have this kind of one framework that I always relate to, that is very simple to understand, very clear, also for a client as well. That is the strategic choice cascade, right? It looks simple, but it's super powerful. Okay, great, you have it. All right, perfect. So strategic choice cascade exists, and it has been there forever. It's a very known framework in this strategy community world, right? And it's quite simple, right? It starts from the top, okay? And it's basically says that if you want to develop a yearly strategy or even like a 5-year strategy, you have to answer those 5 questions, right? The first question you ask yourself is, okay, well, what are our aspirations and goals, right? On the long run, what's our guiding purposes? What are objective? And sometimes I also like to have a measurable objective, a BHAG, right? A big, hairy, I forgot what's the A and the G, right? So it's a big thing. For example, I want to get 1 million users within 5 years, right? I want to sell $50 billion of whatever soda in 10 years, right? So the purpose of the enterprise is important, but it's also good to have like a measurable kind of very, long-term objective. Then once we answer this question, okay, the second question we ask is, okay, where we will play, right? Basically is, what we will be selling, where, to whom, is our portfolio like very diversified, or is it focused? What are the top geographies I want to focus on, etc., etc. It's like, what's my playground, right? The third question we ask ourselves is, okay, I've decided, on my objective. I've decided on where I want to play, who I'm going to target. The third question I want to ask myself is, okay, how can I serve those people, right? What is my value proposition? Why are they going to buy my product, right? What's my competitive advantage versus the rest of the market? It's really highlighting, what is my unique value for those people, right? On that third step, sometimes, and by the way, there are many versions of that strategic choice cascade. Sometimes you can also add, what will be my main activities, right? I tend to want to put it on the fourth rectangle, but you can also say, okay, well, if I want to deliver on this value proposition, well, what will be my main initiative this year, right? The fourth question, it becomes a little bit more, processy, in the sense that, okay, if I want to deliver this value proposition to those people to serve this ambition, well, what skills do I need, right? Do I need, for example, well, let's take the Facebook example, right? If they want to go full mobile, well, they probably need like whatever mobile software engineers or something like this, right? So one is, who do I need and in what configuration, in the sense that what is my structure, right? What are the different departments I have and the different divisions I have, right? The fifth and last one is really kind of the management systems in place, right? What is the IT system I need? What is the structures I need? The internal processes I need? And it goes a little bit beyond strategy, I would say. It becomes more about, process and, process building, etc. The last thing I want to say, and that's actually maybe the most important point I want to say on that, is that this is not a written in stone process. You see those small arrows here, right? They're here to say that once you decide this, you can go to decide the aspirations and goals. You can go to the where we will play. But once you make the decision on where we will play, it doesn't mean that you cannot go back to the aspirations and goals, right? And this is, if you want, the art piece of developing the strategy. It's never, so clear that I can jump straight to the next one and then to the next one, right? So you can even get here to the red rectangle, the capabilities, and then realize, oh, well, I need to invest a lot of money to get those guys. It's not worth it, actually. And then you can climb up back to the aspiration and goals and change it. Usually it's not, it's not the best thing, but you can always go up and change the first thing you decided, right? So all in all, there's a lot of frameworks out there. I like this one, even when I use it internally, right? Don't really have to show it to my clients, but sometimes I use it, I put it on a piece of paper, and then the questions are so simple to answer that I have more clarity on what I want to achieve this year.
That it's questions that we can answer and have discussions around. I think that really makes for a good opportunity to collect input from the other stakeholders that are involved in the process. Thank you for sharing this. I really like this one. Hopefully our audience is also getting a lot of value out of it. Marilyn, I'd like to move to you because we all know you love a good framework. So I know that you have a few up your sleeve. Tell us a little bit about the frameworks that you really like for annual strategic planning, and maybe let us know more.
Sure. I mean, I'll start by maybe explaining why I love frameworks, right? I think, I had a strategy professor who once said something to me that I loved. He said, you don't need frameworks to have a gut feeling about what your strategy should be, right? And no matter what level of the organization you're in, and no matter what your scope of influence is, you need frameworks because, as you're saying, this is the market we're going to attack next year. We're going to enter into this new geography. We're going to focus on this thematic, whatever it is. You need a gut check, right? Because yes, your gut might be in the right place, but just take a second, take a step back. And the reason I love frameworks is they force you to answer a series of structured questions. And I don't think that you should, like Roger said, I think there's a good reason why there's dozens of frameworks, because they're all useful. And there's a good reason we still use good old SWOT analysis, which was developed like in the 60s, because it's still useful, right? And so I think that putting together the frameworks that help you to double check whether your gut feeling was in the right place, just make sure you didn't forget some really important fact in that decision making. And the second reason I love frameworks, and it's related to a question that Billy has asked in the chat, and I think we're going to get to it, which is how do you communicate strategy to the teams? You can, of course, come and say, hello, everybody, here's our strategy. You know, if you're lucky, some organizations don't even bother with that. But you can also take a step back and say, here's how we arrived to this strategy. We use these frameworks. So not only frameworks are a good way to do a gut check, they're a great way to communicate to others why you made this decision. And if you're the kind of leader who's comfortable with then having your team, and we'll talk about that bottom up versus top down approach, that was one of the questions that we're going to be answering today. If you really think that your team is in a good place to help you with your strategy, and both Roger and I are firm believers that strategy is not a top-down exercise, then explaining how you got to your decision allows people to challenge you on that decision, and maybe they'll teach you something, you know, maybe they'll actually correct you on your assumptions about something. And that's why I love a good framework. And one that I love particularly, it's on our next slide. I see you've started doodling, but that's don't worry about that, don't panic. One that I really love because it's not prescriptive. It's telling you as a company, the right place for you to be, and Roger's framework says the same thing, is at the intersection of what your customers want, what your competitors cannot deliver, but you can, and that is relevant for your context. And then within, how do you do context analysis? Dozens of frameworks. You can even, again, I'm a good student. I love my academic frameworks. You can go back and do a Pestley analysis. You can do a Porter's 5 forces. Like there's a lot of like great academic frameworks. I'm sticking a URL here for a website that has all of them listed. So whether it's context analysis, competitors, customers, your own capabilities, dozens of frameworks out there to help you analyze them. And then, as Roger said, there's a bit of art in like, well, how do these overlap? And where exactly is the sweet spot? It's not that simple, but it is. And that's another thing I like to say a lot, and we'll talk about it in a minute, which is that strategy is not meant to be hard. If it's hard, then how can we get thousands of people to execute it? It's not meant to be that your strategic decision for the year is impossible to understand. It's actually meant to be quite simple. Otherwise, you know, we can't get there. And I think, you know, we'll talk a bit more about how to go now from we've figured out what we want to do to, okay, but how do we actually let everybody know, and how do we align the organization? But this is one of my favorites because of, you can put anything you want in it, just don't forget to look at all these things, you know?
When we have our strategy, and you know, we're looking to get everybody aligned, obviously from the early days of its development to the execution of what it looks like, as this visual depicts, the journey looks a little different, right? Your start and finish line can vary. And so I'd like to ask, you know, what are some of the ways you suggest getting teams aligned and ready to execute and delivering on the strategy?
Yeah, it's a very good, very nice drawing. I did the left part, and I don't know what happened with the right part. Someone messed it up. Okay, so back in the days when we were able to go to our clients and, you know, stay at their office pre-COVID, well, now we can do it. But what I like the most, and what I found the most helpful thing, is actually walk in the office of my client and go to not the senior leadership or, you know, the big guys, the big shots in the company, but actually goes to the N-3 or -4. And then I would, you know, drink a coffee with them and, you know, ask them about the company and how they feel about it and where it should be going. And honestly, this is where I get most values for my project, because they know how the company works, right? They have very cool insights, and very often they're not involved in the strategic decisions, right? So my point is to say that we need to involve everybody in developing the strategy, or at least get their input, because they have valuable insights, right? So enough with the top-down approach, enough, right? It's not 5 guys in a room deciding for like 20,000 people and then, you know, just imposing it on everyone, right? It should be bottom up. It should be it should be the standard, right? Bottom-up strategy delivery is how you get everybody aligned. And I can tell you, I'm pretty sure there's a research out there that shows that when you do bottom-up strategy development, you have like much percent chance of success, right? So when you get people involved, you get everybody aligned, right? The second thing I would say is that you remember the core team that we mentioned at the beginning, right? The process that you start by, creating a core team of people that will deliver on the strategic plan. I tend to like to have a core team that is across different departments in the company, right? Because once they participate in the strategic plan development, they will be advocate of the strategic plan, which means that their team will be on board as well, right? So you take 5-6 people that are head of different teams, and then you get them involved as well. So it's not just a core team of strategists, right? It's the strategy guy, the finance guy, the IT guy, the operation guy, whatever you want to include in that core team. And the third thing, I know, Marilyn, you want to talk. Give me 1 second.
I want to say or girl. I want to say or girl.
Oh, yeah. Okay, excuse me. All right, point taken. I forgot one. Yeah. So the third one is, okay, communication, right? It's communicating, and Marilyn, you mentioned that earlier, right? When everybody's on board, like when everybody knows what's happening, right? You have 10 times more chance of success for your strategy. That's a given, right? So they can participate, but not everybody can participate in strategy, right? But at least that they know what's happening. And I cannot tell you how many times I went to a company and asked them, do you know what's happening? Do you know what's your vision? Do you know what's your objective? And I actually run survey with clients where like 85% of the company didn't know how to answer that they have a good understanding of the vision of the company, right? So, I mean, there's a small anecdote. I'm pretty sure it's an urban legend, but it's okay, right? There's this anecdote that says that, when JFK Kennedy, he visited the NASA in like 1965 or whatever, just before the moon program. And he asked a janitor, what was his job? And the janitor answered to him, my job is to put someone on the moon, right? So probably it's not true, right? But it says a lot. It means that the janitor is not only here to clean the floor, but he's an important piece of delivering the overall vision of the company, which is in that case the NASA.
Maybe Marilyn, over to you, and kind of sharing a little bit about how you recommend getting teams aligned to the strategy, and how we can make sure that that alignment is actually seeing the strategy go from conceptual, presentation to real-time delivery and execution.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there tends to be this idea that like only the people at the top can or should be aware of the strategy. I've worked with and been in many companies where there was even this kind of sense that the company's strategy shouldn't be shared with employees. It's quite fascinating to think about it, as if not sharing it might make it more likely that we actually achieve it. So there's another, call it a framework or a template that I really love. First of all, I think that you don't just share the strategy, right? The strategy is only one of the organizational statements. There are other statements. Your purpose and values are really important. Your vision and mission are really important. Telling people why you exist and come to work every day, because those things don't tend to change every year, whereas your strategy might change every year or even shorter than that, depending on what environment you operate in. So the first thing I say is they should all be considered together, especially for someone like me coming from the brand side of the conversation, not the strategy side of the conversation, the human side. I think that brand and purpose and values should influence your strategy as much as the market dynamics, right? And so that's the first thing. And then I have a really simple template that's a strategy statement template that I've shared on the next slide. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I think Roger will probably echo this. He asks people, what's your strategy? They can't tell you. I often run this exercise with our clients. And when we first start talking about strategy, they say, oh, no, we know what our strategy is. I'm like, great, put it in a sentence. And there's a framework for that, right? This comes from an HBR article. And I love it because it's so simple, it's hard. The saying, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time. And it's very simple things. It's what's our goal? in which domain, whether geographic or target audience or whatever, are we going to achieve it? And what is the one thing about our company that's going to allow us to beat everybody else at this game, right? What is the one competitive advantage that we're going to develop? And most people, it takes them 3 weeks to be able to fill out the strategy statement, because the second you have to simplify it, now you have to ask yourself, it's not a 90-page document of slides where you can put whatever you want and talk forever, and it doesn't even have to all make sense together. No, it's one sentence. Can you do it, right? And on the right is an example from the article. This is Edward Jones. We want to grow to 17,000 financial advisors. Here's the big, hairy goal for this year. Of course, BHAG is usually meant for long term, but just for this year, this is our goal. And this is what we're going to offer: trusted and convenience face-to-face financial advice. This is who we're going to offer it to: conservative individual investors who delegate their financial decisions. And here's what we're going to do in order to have competitive advantage. We're going to build a national network of one financial advisor offices. Bam, that's it. Of course, there are dozens of smaller decisions and underlying statements. But if everybody in your company can repeat this one, you're already better off than 95% of other companies. So I think there's the importance of like accepting complexity in your analysis, but also being able to return to simplicity in your communication are both things that have to happen at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And kind of something that we always say is referring to that quote that says, if I had more time, I'd write you a shorter letter. So oftentimes it's much easier to kind of get that long-winded 90-page document where you can consider every nuanced element, but then to actually, make it concise and brief and put it into a statement, it's a bit of a tricky exercise. So then maybe I guess kind of leading into my next question, I want to ask you, how is it that we can make sure our strategy trickles down to every aspect of work? In case you guys haven't noticed, we love a good meme and a good comic. But really, we want to make sure that when we have our strategy in simple form and in long-term form, how can we get every department, every function to realize it and to live it out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll refer to again, another framework. The point today was also to give you guys some value, and that you can go and Google things later on and maybe use them. I know that we're, in the last 3 months of the year, so many of you are probably working on your strategies. Again, so this is, I love what May wrote in the comments. She wrote, make it campaignable, right? Like turn it into something that everybody can connect with and interact with and understand. And one document that I really love, or one framework that I really love, and this also somehow answers Marie's question that I see in the chat around how can entrepreneurs do the planning for their upcoming strategy, because there's a lot of stuff that entrepreneurs don't necessarily have access to, like market data. Who knows, maybe it's irrelevant. Maybe they're inventing a new market. Last year's performance doesn't exist. We weren't around last year. So there's a lot of things that in a larger organization with a more mature or established market, you might be able to rely on that. Maybe here gets a bit difficult. And in any case, you're making a bet as an entrepreneur that you're seeing something in the market that everybody else isn't, right? I really love this framework. It's 1 page, literally. It's not 90 slides. Although, of course, if you look into it, you could develop each section into 5 slides. But the beauty of it is it's simple. You can print it on an A3. And it includes everything from your people, your capabilities, your values, your brand, your purpose, to what is the big, 5-year hairy goal, and also what is next year's goal, clearly laid out. What revenue do you want to make? What's your growth margin? Whatever. And then some very clear, down to earth, great, what are you going to do to get there? Roger mentioned earlier, have your 3 or 4 initiatives. This framework allows you to document it. So later on, you guys, or now, we can maybe get a link for you. There's a lot of great literature about how to fill out the OPSP. It was developed by Jim Collins in his consulting company, Gazelles. If you haven't read his books, they're also really interesting and have beautiful war stories. And I think from there, and this is a framework that we've applied together as an organization. Like literally, when I started Cosmic Centaurs, I was like, great. So next year, all I could give you was 1 goal. I was like, this is how much revenue we're going to make. And I think this is how many clients we should have, right? Literally, that's all I had as an entrepreneur. I was like, let's figure it out. What are we going to sell? What does the market say? Does it exist or not? It almost felt obsolete to look at it. But what we did is we then take this and we say, okay, Marilyn, cute. If you want to have this level of revenue and this many clients. What do we need to do? So we're showing you like our own process, right? Literally, those are slides from last year's strategic planning exercise, where we're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to do BD. We're gonna have to actually do the consulting, like deliver the work. We're gonna have to do some content marketing, something, maybe some training like this, some speaking, maybe R&D, some internal work, like we have to do admin and keep our books, you know, up to date, stuff like that. And then what we do, and this is how you start involving everybody, and Tala, you can attest to this because you had to do this yourself without any of my help. And I was like, okay, Tala, go away and tell me, what do you need to do for this to work, right? And one example that we're showing you is in the marketing department. So this is literally actually our initiatives from last year. Oh, you know, we think we need to do a podcast. And this is where it becomes very simple for a manager, not someone who thinks they're like the head of strategy, just like someone who knows what they're doing. To be like, okay, Marilyn, you want us to do that? Tayyib. We're going to do a podcast. We're going to launch our Instagram. We're going to fix our website because it's not where it's supposed to be, et cetera, et cetera. And you start putting in initiatives. And then from there, you're like, well, how are we going to measure if we're successful? Well, here's some KPIs that we can track. And I think that very quickly takes you from like, here's the big thing that everybody's meant to achieve, to here's down to the level of like every activity, how we're going to do that and how we're going to measure that we're successful, right? And then from there, you build your budget. And I think we can, you know, somebody messaged me privately who used to work with me in a previous company. And, you know, him and I had worked together on zero-based budgeting, which if you guys don't know what that is, you know, there's always a joke that in most companies, and as Roger said, budgeting is at the end of this process, but budgeting is how you commit to the fact that you're going to build this plan out, because in the end, if you don't have money to execute, then what's the point, right? But from here you can say, okay, well, here's how much, here are all my initiatives, this is everything I'm going to do, and this is the effort it's going to require me, these are the things I have to buy. Are the capabilities already internal? Great, then it's a salary. Are they external? Okay, I have to buy them. What's the market price? And then you go to your budget. And that's, to me, like that jump from here to there is truly magical, because I've ran this in many teams, and this process is without fail, like always works, because you go from some vague strategy statement to, well, here's exactly how we're going to execute the plan.
Yeah, I know we want to leave people to ask other questions, but I just want to react on this. Yes, definitely that. I mean, the worst that can happen when we deliver strategies is that it's not followed up by an implementation plan, right? And this is some kind of bad reputation strategists have. This is like they never give actionable plans, and we always tend to want to do that. I'm just going to put a link on the chat, which is a very good book that I advise you to read. It's The Beginner's Guide to OKRs, which is actually what you've done, Marilyn. If you go back one slide, yeah. Okay. No, yeah, exactly right. Which is OKRs, right? This is something I would recommend you to read about. I don't know. We don't have much time for it, but it's basically putting objectives and how we and key results that are very tangible. And actually, you should associate the key results or the KPIs to someone that is accountable for it. And this is how you make people involved, right? It's not only them knowing the strategy, but being accountable for a part of it.
Having not done much business strategy planning before, it was a really simple process and allowed, you know, they say authorship is ownership, right? So when you're responsible for writing it and developing it, you then become attached to it. Like, I'm like, you know, guys, we're not meeting our website traffic KPIs. I care. I'm determined to kind of make sure that we meet those. And also because it's not just a way for my leadership to measure you, but for a roadmap for your success throughout the year. And I really love being a part of this process. And I have to say, like, it demystified it. It made strategy not daunting, and it made it simple. And from there, I could jump into the budgeting, because as you guys said, you know, we have our initiatives, our KPIs, and also we knew exactly what was needed and the effort it could take. And so we were able to then jump into that. Yeah. Thank you both so much for your insights on this. Maybe Roger, a closing question for you actually is, once we have the strategy, how can we inspire everyone to deliver on it? And not in the sense that how do you get them to act, but what do you do to kind of get them to rally around the flag? And are there, you know, can you make it fun? Are there things we can do to get the teams that we work with energized and eager to deliver? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
So first of all, can you make strategy fun? Of course, I think in the consulting world, when we used to have a strategy project, we would be so happy because they're the most interesting and most rewarding projects. Versus other projects were process optimization and cost structure and all these things, right? The strategic thinking is super fun if you're not worried about it, right? That being said, to inspire everyone, I think there are many ways that can be done, right? We involve them, etc., etc. One cool thing I've seen at a company, it was that every year in September, I think they would start, developing the strategic plan, and then just before Christmas, they would actually have, completed the plan, and then they would gather everyone in a hall, in a conference, and kind of make it an event, right? Announcing the strategy for the next year. And everybody would be so happy to see, okay, well, what are we going to work on? What's the priorities for us? How am I getting involved with this? And not only that, they could start thinking during the Christmas break of how they can contribute to developing the strategy. So I thought that, making it festive to announce the annual plan makes it a little bit less dramatic, right? A little bit less kind of performance oriented, like we have to do this or else we're going to die, right? And I thought that is very good. And actually I do it with my team as well, right? Anytime we have a strategic update, because we kind of do it not on a yearly basis, but on a 3-month basis, we gather everyone and then, we announce the priorities, and then we have a drink or we eat something, and it becomes a little bit less processy and more festive, I would say.
Kind of as it's approaching, gives us a chance to think about how are we going to reflect on last year's strategy, kickstart and get excited for next year's strategy. It's a really good tipping point to kind of have that celebration and get teams energized. Marilyn, anything you wanted to add to kind of from your perspective, how I can make strategy fun and get people energized around it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first I want to bounce off, I know Strathaus and Cosmic Centaurs have worked together quite a bit in the past, so we know a bit about each other's processes. And I think this idea of like strategy doesn't need to be a 5-year thing. You can have a 90-day view and keep refreshing it. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have a long-term view on where you're headed, but it also means that you can be more nimble in how you're going to get there, right? Like there is no single path to your strategy. And I think that iterative thing for me is how you make it fun. There tends to be a lot of focus on putting the big brains in the room, and we do it once a year and we think forward, and how, like, when I talk about strategy, in order to demystify it a bit, one of the metaphors, I guess, that I use is a simple question. And it's about why we think that strategy comes from one person. So Tala, how many brains do we have?
We have 3.
We don't have one brain. Go look it up. We have 3 brains. We have a brain in our head, we have a brain in our gut, we have a brain in our heart, like actual centers of decision making. But when the first sort of discovery around that came into scientific research, it was ignored for over a century, ignored by other scientists. And we built our company. Why? Because we only have one head, right? That's what we always think. There can only be a head, one brain that makes all the decisions. And we built our companies in the same way. Oh, we need the CEO. Why should the CEO be doing all the strategy? It makes no sense. Also, it's a lot of pressure, And I think that kind of decentralizing that is what Roger and I have both been advocating for, making it more iterative. Your body makes new decisions all the time based on the context. It doesn't just say, this is how we're going to act for the next year. And removing not the pressure, but I think the ritual of that yearly strategy, as if one could only develop strategy in November, what's up with that? And making it iterative. And I think maybe, I don't know if it makes it fun, but I think it makes it less scary. Something that we do on a monthly basis is we report on the achievements, right? Like all those KPIs that you guys saw at the bottom of that thing, every month, we all come together as a team and we're like, all right, from a marketing point of view, here's how we've done. From a business development point of view, here's how we've done. So on and so forth. Here's our total achievement. Are we getting closer to our goal? No. Okay, what are we going to do next month? And it becomes just ingrained in our way of thinking, as opposed to this scary part of the year where after it everybody collapses and you can't talk to them until January 15. I don't know why it has to be so scary. I think strategy, as Roger said, is it's fun, it's ingrained in us. We're all capable of developing great strategy, and we need to stop being afraid of those words.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you for that and for everything you guys have shared. We do have a few questions in the chat, and actually I'd love to, maybe I'll stop sharing and we can answer some of them, just to kind of help everybody who's working on their strategies. We know it's that time of year, and we did want to create this session so that you guys could have some tools, resources, and ideas to approach your annual planning. I'll start with a question from Rami. He wants to know, how do you deal with the misses?
You mean when you get the strategy wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I answer that?
Please.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know. I don't know what I've been enlightened with the answer, like life. I think it's a very, very valid question, because what we've seen and what we're advocating increasingly to our client, and to rebound on what you said also, Marilyn, is that we no longer come in with, this is the plan, right? This is your 3 years plan, 1 year's plan. Actually, what we advocate is that we have a strategy that is updated every 3 months. Mm-hmm. So every 3 months we would come back, see the KPI, see what's wrong, interview the people, what's happening, what's working, and then we adjust, right, the track. We can no longer have 3-year strategy. This is done. If you ever get someone to sell you a 5-year strategy, just refuse it, right? Because strategy is really continuous, right? How do you deal with the misses? Is by having this process that is flexible and then you can adjust quickly. What we also often do is that we design tests for our clients. We tell them, for example, we believe this is your strategic priority for, this year, right? You have to move your distribution to whatever, to Egypt, for example. But what we tell them, okay, wait, let's not, invest $1 billion in opening in Egypt. Let's design those tests that if they are positive, then we would do the move, right? And this is how also you can be very flexible and agile.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think that agility also means that as leaders, we have to be okay with saying we made the wrong decision. Like, guess what, guys? The data told us we should go there. We made a mistake. Now let's talk about it. Do we retract? Do we change our decisions? Is it just that we executed badly? Like, let's analyze at what point of this process did we have a miss, so that we can learn. And I think learning organizations are something that's really important in a world that has increasingly is moving at a speed that becomes more and more difficult to plan for. I always say this too, like, governments used to have infrastructure planning for like 50 years from now. They can't do that anymore. So even in like the really long scale kind of view of time, even governments are having to shorten their cycle. It's all right. We're going to make a few mistakes along the way. The good news, and what I've learned being an entrepreneur now, because it was very different when I was a manager in a corporate organization or in a startup, is your company can take a lot more mistakes than you think. You can make a lot more bad decisions than you think. The question is how quickly do you readjust, and how quickly do you learn from them? That's what makes or breaks a strategy. It's, can you learn? Because as Roger said, you need experiments.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. I think learning and being ready to iterate and be agile and adapt is something that's so important. We had actually a question from Anwar, and maybe we can deep dive on the measurement piece about our success. He wants to know, how can you measure the holistic success of a strategy?
Yeah.
No,
I guess this is to make it very tangible, right? Once we've identified the 4 or 5 strategic pillars for the year, then those pillars, in order to make sure that they are successful, we attach KPIs to them, right? And the KPIs have to be measurable. Some people are accountable for it, etc., etc. Every 3 months, you see how far you are from those KPIs, right? Holistically, by looking at all the KPIs together. People can also kind of build models of performance measurement models, where you kind of compile all the KPIs. You give a little bit more weight to some KPIs because you believe they're more important than others, and then you have at the end one indicator that tells you if you're on the right track or not on the right track. So that kind of answer your question of how to do it holistically, right? You can always compile the data and make like one indicator that says, yeah, we're going on the right direction or we're not going in the right direction. But having those KPIs is mega important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Marilyn, something you want to add to build on Roger's answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe just to look at that question of, holistically, right? I think you could, I mean, I measure through KPIs our progress in terms of both input or output and outcome, right? Like we say, did we do what we've said we were going to do? And then did it have the effect we thought it was going to have? And then I think the beauty of the question that Anwar asked, the holistic success of a strategy, is maybe to get a bit philosophical right there, is strategy just about making money? For some companies it is. And so the holistic measurement is our revenue, our margin, whatever, For me, I've always said that I built this company. One of the reasons I built this company is I wanted to be happy coming to work. And so for me, a holistic measurement is that I'm still happy. That it's not just, my purpose shines through here. And like, we want to build happy workplaces for others. We also want our own workplace to be happy. And the day that stops being the case, no matter what other KPIs we hit, then it won't be successful anymore. So I think the beauty of that is, we've measured economic value added for companies for a very long time. Maybe some people want to measure societal value added, and that's how they measure success. Maybe it's not about profit, it's about, did I contribute to my community? I definitely manage employee value added, I think that that's an intrinsic part of our holistic measurement. And so I think a bit of soul searching is required to answer that question.
Answer. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have just enough time for maybe one more question, but before I jump to the last one, a quick thank you to those of you who did attend. Marilyn dropped a quick survey. We'd love for you guys to take part, and also how you can get in touch with both Marilyn and Roger. But maybe a fun rapid fire. Would love for you each to quickly answer this question, and then we'll jump to the last audience question. Really quickly, Roger, let's start with you. Strategy is, complete the sentence.
Don't forget to unmute yourself. We had to say it at least once.
Yeah. I would say strategy is continuous, right? Can I add another word as well? It's continuous and continuous and collaborative, right? This is the future of strategy, I must say. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
You stole words. I'm going to pick new words if I have to. Yeah, I'll say strategy is flexible and simple. Shouldn't be complicated. It should be simple because you need thousands of people to execute it, and it should be flexible because I think the pandemic has brought in this concept of flexibility, of resilience, of agility, much to the front of our thinking, and I think we need to start thinking about strategy in those terms.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you, guys. We'll take one last audience question, and then, of course, if any other trickle in, we can maybe answer a few. Mohammed wants to know how Cosmic Centaurs helps companies in structuring the strategy function, a department per se. Let's say within the example given is a multi-vertical family office. So,
wow. Give me a call.
Heavy question.
This is a very complicated one because, in fact, and it goes back to something Roger said earlier about asking your shareholders. Family offices are they're also incredibly good at what they do. That's not to say that like they're always emotional, but they're also very emotional environments because strategy isn't just strategy there. It also has to do with alliances and old stories and who's allied with who in the family and how do they see the vision of the future. And when you look at family offices, there's also the debate of like that the short-term view versus the long-term view. Is it multi-generational or not? Like, I think family offices are a very really interesting and beautiful use case, and it has a lot to do with understanding the humans that in the end are going to live from this and how they see their legacy and how they see the future for their children and their children. So it's a complicated one. I don't know, Roger, if you wanted to add to that, but I think that's where I would start because then it's a multi-vertical thing. There's always this thing with family offices, especially in the region, that it's not really clear why they have all these verticals. They would have started, I don't know, having a distribution for, I don't know, car brand in the region, and then that did really well, and then suddenly they bought a supermarket and that did really well, and it's not clear why these things coexist. So there's a bit of work on that front too, and trying to figure it out. But yeah, or if it's just an investment office, yet another story. But yeah, Roger, go for it. Sorry.
No, it's a great question. It's very tough to answer. But I would say, okay, just because we don't have much time, is like take the 5 core functions you have in that family office, put them in a room, and put someone on top of them to help them strategize together.
Yikes. That person better be really, really capable of compassion. Huh?
Diplomatic, yeah, exactly.
Sounds like you might also need a mediator in that room.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Another maybe question while we're here, is single-mindedness critical to proper execution? This is a question courtesy of.
I don't believe that for a second. Like the way I understand this question is it important to focus on only one aim? I think there's been a lot of like that contagion from Silicon Valley that says like, you have to be really good at just one thing. And sure enough, sometimes that works, but I like to think that we are able as human beings to grasp complexity. And it doesn't mean that being really good at one thing is bad. It just means it's not the only way to go.
I would still add that you need a center of gravity sometimes.
For episode 2, tune in next week. Roger and I take each other down.
I will lose, of course. I
Awesome.
certainly lose against you.
No, I think it'll be a fair debate. But I guess to close it out, just want to say thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you to Roger and to Marilyn for sharing all of your insights with us. We learned a lot, lots of frameworks, and you guys will receive some of the content that we shared. Hopefully, if you're signed up to the newsletter, please do take the survey. We've dropped a link in the chat. Maybe I'll ask Marilyn to drop it in once more if you guys could include it there. And yeah, just want to thank you all and really appreciate your time. Thanks for learning with us.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun, Roger. We definitely need episode 2.
More of those. All right.
Absolutely. For those of you still with us, if you'd like to, take the QR code, you're welcome to use that to take the survey. It will only take you 3 minutes.
And I mean, I'm still around. I think Roger had to leave. He probably has a meeting, but if you want to chat, unmute yourselves. We're here. There's still some of you in the room, so happy to discuss it. Otherwise, it was really lovely. The level of engagement was incredible. We're very grateful.